Thank you, Mrs. Walpole said again, inadequately. You tell Tom Kittredge I'll be down for a pork roast later this morning, Mrs. Nash said. Tell him to save it for me. I shall. Mrs. Walpole hesitated in the doorway, and Mrs. Nash waved the fork at her. See you later, Mrs. Nash said. Old Man White was sitting on his front porch in the sun. When he saw Mrs. Walpole, he grinned broadly and shouted to her, Guess you're not going to have any more dog. I've got to be nice to him, Mrs. Walpole thought. He's not a traitor or a bad man by country standards. Anyone would tell on a chicken-killing dog. But he doesn't have to be so pleased about it, she thought, and tried to make her voice pleasant when she said, Good morning, Mr. White. Gonna have her shot? Mr. White asked. Your man got a gun? I'm so worried about it, Mrs. Walpole said. She stood on the walk below the front porch and tried not to let her hatred show in her face as she looked up at Mr. White. It's too bad about a dog like that, Mr. White said. At least he doesn't blame me, Mrs. Walpole thought. Is there anything I can do? She said. Mr. White thought. Believe you might be able to cure a chicken killer, he said. You get a dead chicken and tie it around the dog's neck so he can't shake it loose, see? Around her neck? Mrs. Walpole asked, and Mr. White nodded, grinning toothlessly. See, when he can't shake it loose at first, he tries to play with it, and then it starts to bother him, see? And then he tries to roll it off, and it won't come, and then he tries to bite it off, and it won't come. And then when he sees it won't come, he thinks he's never going to get rid of it, see? And he gets scared. And then you'll have him coming around with his tail between his legs, and this thing hanging around his neck, and it gets worse and worse. Mrs. Walpole put one hand on the porch railing to steady herself. What do you do then? She asked. Well, Mr. White said, the way I heard it, see, the chicken gets riper and riper, and the more the dog sees it and feels it and smells it, see, the more he gets to hate chicken, and he can't ever get rid of it, see? But the dog, Mrs. Walpole said, lady, I mean, how long do we have to leave it around her neck? Well, Mr. White said with enthusiasm, I guess you leave it on until it gets ripe enough to fall off by itself. See, the head. I see, Mrs. Walpole said. Would it work? Can't say, Mr. White said. Never tried it myself. His voice said that he had never had a chicken-killing dog. Mrs. Walpole left him abruptly. She could not shake the feeling that if it were not for Mr. White, Lady would not have been identified as the dog killing the chickens. She wondered briefly if Mr. White had maliciously blamed Lady because they were city folk, and then thought, no man around here would bear false witness against a dog. When she entered the grocery, it was almost empty. There was a man at the hardware counter, and another man leaning against the meat counter talking to Mr. Kittredge, the grocer. When Mr. Kittredge saw Mrs. Walpole come in, he called across the store. Morning, Mrs. Walpole. Fine day. Lovely, Mrs. Walpole said, and the grocer said, Bad luck about the dog. I don't know what to do about it, Mrs. Walpole said, and the man talking to the grocer looked at her reflectively, and then back at the grocer. Killed 3 chickens up to Harris's this morning, the grocer said to the man, and the man nodded solemnly and said, Heard about that. Mrs. Walpole came across to the meat counter and said, Mrs. Nash said, would you save her a roast of pork? She'll be down later to get it. Going up that way, the man standing with the grocer said. Drop it off. Right, the grocer said. The man looked at Mrs. Walpole and said, Gonna have to shoot him, I guess. I hope not, Mrs. Walpole said earnestly. We're all so fond of the dog. The man and the grocer looked at one another for a minute, and then the grocer said reasonably, Won't do to have a dog going around killing chickens, Mrs. Walpole. First thing you know, the man said, someone will put a load of buckshot into him. He won't come home no more. He and the grocer both laughed. Isn't there any way to cure the dog? Mrs. Walpole asked. Sure, the man said. Shoot him. Tie a dead chicken around his neck, the grocer suggested. That might do it. Heard of a man did that, the other man said. Did it help? Mrs. Walpole asked eagerly. The man shook his head slowly and with determination. You know, the grocer said. He leaned his elbow on the meat counter. He was a great talker. You know, he said again, my father had a dog once used to eat eggs. Got into the chicken house and used to break the eggs open and lick them up. Used to eat maybe half the eggs we got. That's a bad business, the other man said. Dog eating eggs. Bad business, the grocer said in confirmation. Mrs. Walpole found herself nodding. Last, my father couldn't stand it no more. Here half his eggs were getting eaten, the grocer said. So he took an egg once, set it on the back of the stove for 2-3 days, till the egg got good and ripe, good and hot through, and that egg smelled pretty bad. Then, I was there. Boy 12, 13 years old. He called the dog one day, and the dog come running. So I held the dog, and my daddy opened the dog's mouth and put in the egg, red hot and smelling to heaven. And then he held the dog's mouth closed, so's the dog couldn't get rid of the egg anyway except swallow it. The grocer laughed and shook his head reminiscently. Bet that dog never ate another egg, the man said. Never touched another egg, the grocer said firmly. You put an egg down in front of that dog, he'd run's though the devil was after him. But how did he feel about you? Mrs. Walpole asked. Did he ever come near you again? The grocer and the other man both looked at her. How do you mean? The grocer said. Did he ever like you again? Well, the grocer said, and thought. No, he said finally. I don't believe you could say's he ever did. Not much of a dog, though. There's one thing you ought to try, the other man said suddenly to Mrs. Walpole. You really want to cure that dog, there's one thing you ought to try. What's that? Mrs. Walpole said. You want to take that dog, the man said, leaning forward and gesturing with one hand. Take him and put him in a pen with a mother hen's got chicks to protect. Time she's through with him, he won't never chase another chicken. The grocer began to laugh, and Mrs. Walpole looked bewildered, from the grocer to the other man, who was looking at her without a smile, his eyes wide and yellow, like a cat's. What would happen? She asked uncertainly. Scratch his eyes out, the grocer said succinctly. He wouldn't ever be able to see another chicken. Mrs. Walpole realized that she felt faint. Smiling over her shoulder, in order not to seem discourteous, she moved quickly away from the meat counter and down to the other end of the store. The grocer continued talking to the man behind the meat counter, and after a minute, Mrs. Walpole went outside, into the air. She decided that she would go home and lie down until nearly lunchtime and do her shopping later in the day. At home, she found that she could not lie down until the breakfast table was cleared and the dishes washed, and by the time she had done that, it was almost time to start lunch. She was standing by the pantry shelves, debating, when a dark shape crossed the sunlight in the doorway, and she realized that Lady was home. For a minute, she stood still, watching Lady. The dog came in quietly, harmlessly, as though she had spent the morning frolicking on the grass with her friends. But there were spots of blood on her legs, and she drank her water eagerly. Mrs. Walpole's first impulse was to scold her, to hold her down and beat her for the deliberate, malicious pain she had inflicted, the murderous brutality a pretty dog-like lady could keep so well hidden in their home. Then Mrs. Walpole, watching Lady go quietly and settle down in her usual spot by the stove, turned helplessly and took the first cans she found from the pantry shelves and brought them to the kitchen table. Lady sat quietly by the stove until the children came in noisily for lunch, and then she leaped up and jumped on them, welcoming them as though they were the aliens and she the native to the house. Judy, pulling Lady's ears, said, "Hello, Mom. Do you know what Lady did? You're a bad, bad dog," she said to Lady. "You're going to get shot." Mrs. Walpole felt faint again and set a dish down hastily on the table. "Judy Walpole," she said. "She is, Mom," Judy said. "She's going to get shot." Children don't realize, Mrs. Walpole told herself, Death is never real to them. Try to be sensible, she told herself. Sit down to lunch, children, she said quietly. But Mother, Judy said, and Jack said, She is, Mom. They sat down noisily, unfolding their napkins and attacking their food without looking at it, eager to talk. You know what Mr. Shepherd said, Mom? Jack demanded, his mouth full. Listen, Judy said. We'll tell you what he said. Mr. Shepherd was a genial man who lived near the Walpoles and gave the children nickels and took the boys fishing. He says Lady's going to get shot, Jack said. But the spikes, Judy said. Tell about the spikes. The spikes, Jack said. Listen, Mommy. He says you got to get a collar for Lady. A strong collar, Judy said. And you get big, thick nails like spikes and you hammer them into the collar. All around, Judy said. Let me tell it, Jack. You hammer these nails all around so's they make spikes inside the collar. But it's loose, Jack said. Let me tell this part. It's loose and you put it around Lady's neck. And Judy put her hand on her throat and made a strangling noise. Not yet, Jack said. Not yet, Dopey. First you get a long rope. A real long rope, Judy amplified. And you fasten it to the collar and then we put the collar on Lady, Jack said. Lady was sitting next to him and he leaned over and said, Then we put this real sharp spiky collar around your neck, and kissed the top of her head while Lady regarded him affectionately. And then we take her where there are chickens, Judy said, and we show her the chickens and we turn her loose. And make her chase the chickens, Jack said. And then, when she gets right up close to the chickens, we pull on the rope. And Judy made her strangling noise again. The spikes cut her head off, Jack finished dramatically. They both began to laugh, and Lady, looking from one to the other, panted as though she were laughing too. Mrs. Walpole looked at them, at her two children with their hard hands and their sunburned faces laughing together, their dog with blood still on her legs laughing with them. She went to the kitchen doorway to look outside at the cool green hills, the motion of the apple tree in the soft afternoon breeze. Cut your head right off, Jack was saying. Everything was quiet and lovely in the sunlight, the peaceful sky, the gentle line of the hills. Mrs. Walpole closed her eyes, suddenly feeling the harsh hands pulling her down, the sharp points closing in on her throat,